Hello, college football fans, and welcome to episode 174 of College Football Throwdown. I'm your host, Alex Schmitz, and with me today is my dad, Peter Schmitz.
Hello, Husker fans and college football fans.
Hello, hello. And today we have a special co-host guest with us today, Don Carlson, a Fighting Illini fan.
Go Illini.
Yes. Dad is traveling up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan this week, so he's coming a little more mobile than usual, but hey, we got a special guest, so it'll be a fun time.
Exactly, Alex. We're up here with a group of folks that we travel and RV with every year, do a camping week, and we're just really enjoying the beauty of northern Michigan. The weather is absolutely perfect. It was 75 degrees today and just gorgeous. So we are really enjoying ourselves, and Don's a big college football fan, and in fact, over the fire tonight before we started this call, we were discussing the possibility of him joining us for a first time. So he will be a Nebraska football game virgin coming on September 20th of this year, when the Illini are come to Lincoln and are hosted by Nebraska for the 400th consecutive sellout of Nebraska's Memorial Stadium.
Let's correct that, Pete. That's an upset. The Illini come to Nebraska and upset that.
Right.
You get your revenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, today's podcast will be a bit different. That we'll be talking about our Cornhuskers as usual, but we'll also talk about the Illini, how their spring game went, things of that nature, because we are recording on the last day of the Big Ten Media Days, so we've had a lot of interviews and talking with the various head coaches and things like that, and we'll get into a little bit of national news as well. But before we start on all that, we got to stick with our tradition, open up a cold beverage. I've got one of my Golden Road Mango Cart beers here.
Oh, outstanding. That I'm starting to see that Mango Cart more and more all the time. Their reach is growing, and I think that is a Kona Brewing Company product. Do you know if that's true?
I don't know, but the label does look like their style, so that wouldn't surprise me.
I think it is. So anyway, well, what I'm drinking today, Alex, is it's a throwback. It's your grandpa's favorite beer, and it's a beer that I also imbibed in maybe occasionally when I was a young man. I won't say what age. And it's Old Milwaukee, America's beer. So that's what I'm going to drink. And Don here has one of his as well.
Yes. Alex, I'm drinking a Busch Light, which is a throwback beer back from my grandfather's day when he took my cousin and I fishing. And this was our first experience I won't mention the age either, that we tried our first beer. So this brings back a lot of good memories with my cousin and my grandfather.
Outstanding.
Very
okay.
Nice.
Are we ready?
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. Outstanding. Here we go.
So to kick things off, I figure Don will go ahead and give you the floor here for a bit. Obviously, the Illini are coming off of a 5-7 season last year, and now we're in the new Big Ten with all these new teams and all that kind of stuff. I haven't actually looked at what their schedule is for this year, but how are you feeling about the team based on the spring game and what you've been the reports you've been seeing?
Well, Brett Bielema, his fourth season, fourth year in the Big Ten, and he's brought our program back. I mean, obviously he's got a track record from the past of Wisconsin in the Big Ten championship, but he's brought a lot of good coaches with him over the last 3 years. Even though losing Ryan Walters to Purdue, superior defensive coach that we had a great season 2 years ago. Sad to see him leave, but again, his coaching staff is now in their second year. I think last year was a little bit of a letdown from the first 2 years when we went to bowl games. Last year we fell a little short, but we got 17 returning starters. Not all of our starters were at Illinois, but with the portal, these players have played in 9 or 10 games in their college careers, so they are true starters. Maybe not in our program, but other programs, and we feel like this is the year that we've got to get back for sure to a bowl game and make some noise in this new Big Ten schedule. The spring games are very promising. Injuries were down, and I think Brett's feeling good about starting out 3-0 and then getting to Nebraska and facing the big challenge.
Yeah, I saw that this was Brett Bielema's fourth year. So kind of interesting. He's a little bit more advanced than our coach at his second year, but still kind of feeling things out there. And of course, Nebraska played against Illinois last year at Illinois and won 20-7. As you mentioned, our fourth game this year is at home in Lincoln against Illinois. So it'll be an interesting test. Nebraska will have played Colorado by that point, which is our first real test. So I think how we do in that game will probably dictate a lot of our performance in the Illinois game.
Yeah, I think our quarterback's now got 10 games under his starting career. I think your quarterback's going to be new this year, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep.
But, I think that quarterback play is going to be key. We've lost a couple key defensive players to the NFL, but I think we've kind of restocked the offensive line and defensive line, and it should be a good test for both teams because they should be both undefeated going into that matchup.
That's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
So, a couple of things about their coach, Brett Bielema. He is, a well-known coach. He was, I believe, before he was the head coach at Wisconsin, he was their coordinator. And I don't know if it was defensive or offensive. I feel like it was the defensive.
Defense, yes.
Yeah. So this guy has always had good defenses, and he's got an eye for good defensive coaches. He's got quite a tree, actually, of assistants that started under him and have gone on to greatness in other, either as assistants or head coaches. So he really is kind of a guy that understands the basics of football and how to win in the Big Ten. And so that's why you always know you're going to be facing a deep challenge when you have to play, one of his teams. And they have all their offensive linemen returning, if I remember correctly, from my brief research. And, that's huge because you give him a good offensive line and a good defense, and you better play perfect or he's going to make you pay.
Yeah.
And so for Nebraska, we're going to have to jump on them early if we hope to make it interesting down the stretch. The fact that it's a home game, it's the 400th consecutive sellout. It's a night game on a Friday night. They've moved it to Friday night from Saturday. I think it's going to make the atmosphere absolutely remarkable. And I'm really excited for Don, who has committed to coming to the game with me. So we're gonna have a great time there, and really looking forward to a great season for both the Illini and the Huskers.
And you got to remember, Brent too was Wisconsin. He was a ground game on the offense,
absolutely.
And he hasn't abandoned that in Illinois. I mean, we've had some really good running backs. He has developed running backs, and I don't think he's going to abort that kind of offense. And you got to have the running game to open up the passing game. And like Pete said, I think it's going to be an offensive battle versus a defensive battle come to Nebraska, and I'm looking forward to being there and seeing that game and that atmosphere with good friend Pete here.
Yeah, that should be fun. I did just Google Illinois' schedule, so it looks like you guys are playing Kansas your second game, so you've got another a non-conference game, second game similar to us.
Correct.
And then later in your year, you've got Penn State, Michigan, Oregon, and Michigan State. The other teams on your schedule definitely look doable. So I think you guys have a good chance of making a bowl.
Correct. I mean, Penn State and obviously Ohio State and Michigan, those games are going to be extremely tough. But, we got the first three at home, then we go on the road to Nebraska, and you got to win the first three in order to have a chance for a bowl game. So,
yeah. Well, and that Kansas game, I'm going to be intrigued.
Not a give me.
No, not at all. I have quite a bit of knowledge about Kansas because obviously it's close to Nebraska, and my brother used to coach there, and so he's connected with the university and still goes to all the games and everything. And they are very optimistic this year. They're thinking Big 12 championship.
Well, and look at Nebraska, they got to face Colorado,
who also thinks they're going to win the Big 12.
Correct.
So we will both have had one significant challenge before we get going against each other.
Yeah, Alex, what do you think about Colorado and their chances against Nebraska?
I mean, they're definitely scary. You know, they've got a ton of talent and stuff there, but they've also had a lot of dysfunction in their offseason. You know, a lot of guys have left, a lot of new guys have been brought in. You know, Deion Sanders has a lot of gravitas around him, but he's also a bit of a wild card. So, you know, I think it's actually good, probably. Well, I was about to say it's good that we're playing them early because they may not have gelled at that point. But on the other hand, last season, they did gel quickly and they were at their best early, and then they really fell apart late. Like once they started losing, the wheels kind of came off. So maybe it would be better to play them later. I'm not sure.
Well, that's what I felt about Illinois 2 years ago at Michigan. We had them on the ropes in the last 30 seconds of the game. Should have won in Ann Arbor, but lost in the last second field goal. You know, that's when we were playing our best football. We had a big chance to knock them off. So you're right. Playing someone early is an advantage sometimes.
Yeah. But I was curious, Don, in terms of the media days, was there anything of note that you want to highlight from the head coach or the players?
Not a whole lot. I didn't catch a whole lot being up here camping a little bit. I caught a little bit of Brent's speech the other night. You know, he's excited about the transfer portal and the guys he's brought in on the defensive side of the ball because that's where they lost most of their talent. They kept most of their offensive line. He was excited about it. He's too deep on the offensive line. And as you know, that's where in the trenches, that's where the game really is won or lost most of the time in the trenches. So I think he's excited about that. And his quarterback coming back for his second year with 10 games under his belt. He feels real confident about that. He's got a couple nice wide receivers, running backs. So, and his coaches, his offensive coordinator, he's in his second or third season, I believe, third season. His defensive coordinator's in his second season. So that experience is going to pay off. And I think that's what he talked about more. We got to talk about, you know, building the program, and it's not about winning. We got to get past the 6 wins. We got to get to the 8 to the 10 wins. So I think he's got the right focus.
I was just thinking, you know, obviously with the change in team structure now to the 16 teams, you know, we don't quite have the safety net, you know, of playing in the West anymore, right? We got to play with more of the big boys.
Right.
Exactly.
Unless you're Iowa, somehow they seem to always get an easy schedule. Take a look at that damn schedule. And that's as easy as they ever had in the West. I mean, it just blows me away how they continue to be able to avoid tough schedules. I wanted to get that on the recording.
And they're our rivals, and we don't even play them. That's what surprises me.
Yeah.
Iowa-Illinois game is always one of the biggest games back when I was in school, and it's always been a big rivalry. And now with the realignment, it's come to a fact that we don't even play them, which is kind of sad.
Right. Well, ironically, we've kind of stolen them from you, I guess, because the Big Ten decided they're our rival.
Yeah,
correct.
Right. They're the only one, right? Like that's the only one designated.
Yeah. In terms of the media days in general, like you were saying off the podcast, Dad, the Big Ten commissioner didn't exactly have a ton to say, but Matt Rule did have some nice comments, which we can get to on the Nebraska side of things.
Right. Exactly right. But Don, if you don't want to have any other summary comments, you know, the rest of our crew is out enjoying a beautiful fire and telling crazy stories and things like that. So I think he's going to wander on back to enjoy the company of our friends, and we can continue with the podcast. But just wanted to say thanks to Don for joining us here at the beginning of the podcast. It's always great to have a guest, and especially someone who's knowledgeable about one of our regular conference opponents. So thanks for being here, Don, and we'll look forward to getting together again here in a couple of months and enjoying a fabulous football weekend together.
Absolutely. And I want to say thank you, Pete, for asking me to do this, and Alex for having me. And I wish you all the best, and go Illini. I'm looking forward to the game.
All right. Thank you, Don.
All right. Take care.
We'll see you guys later.
Yep.
All right. So thanks again to our special guest, Don, for joining us for that little Illinois segment. And now we're going to dive into the Husker side of things, starting with the Big Ten Media Days. Matt Rule was there along with a few of our players. And the bit from Matt Rule's speech that I wanted to highlight was he was asked about ball security and, you know, our turnover issue from last year, which is obviously something I'm very keyed in on and something that we saw still being an issue in the spring game. So,
Right.
he said, quote, "It's a blemish. It's something I've never been a part of before. Our season would have been different if it hadn't happened." He said the first steps to fixing that was buy-in. The team practices it daily, and he evaluates how coaches around the country, from high school to the pros, approach turnovers. We won't have to do an overhaul, Rule said. We don't have to fire a bunch of coaches or change the offense or defense. We just have to win the turnover margin. The players truly understand that we have to protect the football. So that's exactly what I want to hear from him, because I 100% believe what he's saying. I just hope that all that practice leads to results on the field.
Yep. Well, and he talked with some former Nebraska coaches, some of Tom Osborne's staff, retired guys that are still around the area and frequent practice, and asked them about what did you guys do, and they encouraged him and said you just got to keep coaching it hard, and eventually the guys will figure it out. And so there's a line that you have to not cross, where you don't get it in their heads where they're swimming around in this whole don't turn it over, don't turn it over thing, right? That's a bad mental psyche. But at the same time, you have to make it very clear that turnovers are unacceptable. So that means that when a fumble or a interception occurs during practice, you can't blow it off. It needs to be coached. It needs to be coached hard right at that moment to break down why did that happen. Was it because the quarterback was getting hurried and he just thought, oh, I'll throw it over here? So is it something where it's a quarterback decision making, or is it a ball security thing with running back or the quarterback after they've made a commitment to run, or because of a blow up of the offensive line where a quarterback gets blindsided and he fumbles it because he wasn't expecting to get hit, and so there's techniques, there's things you can coach in any of those situations, and it's about making that front and center to recognize that if we had just a typical middle of the road turnover margin this year, been at 0 or maybe +1 or -1, somewhere in there, we might very well have won 3 or 4 more games last year. I mean, that's how big a deal turnovers were to our to results of our season. So I don't think there's any doubt that most Nebraska fans feel that's probably one of the, if not the most important things that has to change this year to last year. And I think Coach Rule fully gets it. He understands what we need to do.
Right. Well, and in this speech, he was quoted as saying from -17 to +17 in turnover margin, which obviously, that's what you want. But like you say, I would even, be okay with from -17 to 0,
Right.
That's still an improvement.
A huge improvement.
One quick thought that came to mind with your statement earlier, I remember it was the whole thing with Anthony Grant, how he was having a fumble issue and he was like carrying around a football, to class and stuff. Right. And like, oh, try to take it from me, and to try to teach himself discipline. But do you think that's almost going too far? Is that like getting it in its head, like you were saying?
Well, and it gets a little goofy. It's not part of the sport, right? Whether you're able to hold onto a football while you're walking with your backpack to your next class, and one of your teammates comes up from behind you and punches the ball out, not quite the same as what you have to be doing in terms of your focus and everything while you're on the football field. So I'm not as big of a fan of that particular approach. But I mean, I get why some coaches would feel that's a good thing to do, because it certainly puts it front and center in his focus. But like you say, I think that can get in somebody's head.
Yeah, both in that speech and interview that he gave at the Big Ten Media Days, and then he was also on various different programs. I listened to his interview on the Pat McAfee show. And, Matt is coming off very confident in the team, saying that, he feels he's in a better spot in year 2 in Nebraska than he was in year 2 at Baylor or at Temple. He feels like we can make a big jump this year, get to a bowl game, still saying like that's the goal. There was one bit I thought was particularly interesting, the Pat McAfee interview, where Pat asked him about, all the changes to college football with transfer portal and NIL and things like that. And I thought he gave an interesting answer in that, he's like, I'm generally happy with it. I'm glad players are getting their bag and things like that. But some things that I would change if I could would be that you have to report on the salaries of the players. So that's public knowledge for everyone to keep things more fair, and also just tighten down the rules on the transfer portal. So, coaches aren't, telling a kid to come over to our program, we're going to give you this much in NIL or whatever. And then spring practice comes and the coach doesn't like what he saw from the player. And then he kind of, dumps him off by the wayside. Now he's back in the portal, looking for a spot, kind of like the free agency side of it. He wants that to have more control.
Yeah, I kind of know what you mean on that, Alex. There's so many kind of undefined areas still. We are still dealing with the wild, wild west, and I kind of agree with Coach Rule's point in that I feel like there needs to be a lot of tightening and defining of just what is acceptable and what isn't, so that both transparency exists and also the path to because there's unlimited transfers. Even though you mentioned that you don't want to see that happen. We've already seen that happen with some of the best players in the country who transferred in to a place, and then after spring practice, they transferred back out. And so I think that you might see more of that before you see less of it, unless there's some rules that get established by the governing body, whether it's the NCAA or whether it's just a conference rule that starts to restrict some of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the recent comments, either from Rule or the players who are at the Big Ten Media Days, were there any highlights for you?
Well, yeah, there were a couple of things. First, with Rule, first of all, I think he's just so comfortable, on in that kind of environment. I think he did a really good job just delivering the message. And I agree with you that the underlying thing that I came away with is he's got a quiet confidence about what the team would be, without stating that, we're going to win 8 or 9 games, or making some kind of broad stroke comment like that. We still got to go out there on Saturday and make it happen. But I think he feels like he's got depth that he didn't have last year. He's got guys that were forced into action last year because of all the injuries we had. And now those guys are back and they represent either starting roles or depth, really quality, proven depth that we didn't have last year. We brought in some, obviously, guys we think are going to really contribute from the portal this year. And so, when you kind of add it all up, we're now a team that's got some maturity that we didn't have a year ago, and everywhere except the quarterback spot, right? Most likely, we're going to end up with a freshman quarterback, but he's not your typical freshman quarterback.
No.
So the hope is that he's a guy that if we can protect him and give him reasonable time so he doesn't become gun shy because he's getting the heck beat out of him, is a guy that's going to have some success. And we've got some wide receivers that we think can, challenge defenses and make things interesting. So it'll be fascinating for me to see what our offense looks like. We obviously also made some changes in assignment within the coaching staff, and he mentioned quite a bit. This was the other thing that I really drew out of his comments, and it wasn't necessarily in his press conference where he was in front of the big podium, but when he did more of the sidebar individual conversations with, guys like Huskers Online and 93.7, some of the other radio stations and stuff. He kind of gave insight that, now that the rule exists, that you can have pretty much as many coaches as you want that actually coach players. His goal is to have basically every one of his assistants to kind of have an assistant, right? So you've got 2 guys working on every group, whether it's running back or now you can break down running back into, hey, you're going to take care of fullbacks, I'll take care of my of the I backs. You're going to do the wide receivers. This guy's going to really focus on the slot receivers. This guy's going to focus on the tight ends. And so they're just going to have much more defined roles. And there's still going to be a main assistant who's responsible for bringing it all together. But like Ron Brown, for example, who was just kind of in an advisory role, he specifically said Ron's going to be coaching fullbacks and doing some special team stuff. And he's going to have some very specific coaching roles because he's now back to being able to coach. He's not
Right.
just an advisor. And he mentioned a few other guys. And with our new quarterbacks coach Thomas, he's a guy that is going to be obviously focused on the quarterbacks and being passing game coordinator. But now, Satterfield, who is our offensive coordinator and is going to remain our offensive coordinator, those two guys now are going to be able to work much more hand in hand. I just feel like with this broadening of the coaching responsibilities and adding more to that staff, he's in typical rules fashion, he's mostly promoting from within. He's not necessarily he's gone out and gotten one new coach that I know of that's for this new unlimited coaching rule, right? And that was a guy, he was a coach, very successful coach from Kansas City area. And this is a guy that Coach Rule knew that if this rule changed, he wanted to go get this guy. So as soon as the rule was announced, he went and invited him to join the staff, and the guy did. And he is apparently a tremendous high school coach. Won championships and stuff in Missouri, but he's also got a 4-star wide receiver son who's currently committed to Oregon, and so I see Rule kind of putting together the puzzle, and I just feel like he's doing it in a way that probably is not as aggressive as, say, an Alabama or one of the top SEC schools, or maybe even an Ohio State, who's probably going to be able to go out and literally hire some really premier coaches to be those additional coaches. I think Rule is going to take the approach of building a coaching network, and the goal with that is stability. Because you go out and buy and basically buy some talented coach, they're not going to be satisfied to be the assistant to the assistant. So they're going to be there for a year, maybe two, and then they're gone, right? Where I think Rule is trying to develop a staff that might stick with him for a while.
Right. And with the expectation that, he's promoted from within already, like the guy above me or whatever. So if I stick around here and I do a good job, then maybe I'll eventually be the main assistant or whatever.
Absolutely. And he has a tremendous track record of that. So I feel like he's not going crazy and adding staff right now. I'm sure he will continue to look at opportunities and stuff, but it was pretty clear he wanted that one guy. He knew he wanted to have that guy work for him. And he basically said as much, and so I like the approach that Rule has, and you just don't ever catch him flat-footed.
Yeah.
He's always got a plan.
I was thinking when you were mentioning, our quarterback being a true freshman, which we are all expecting to happen with Dylan Raiola, I kind of thought back to what Don was asking me about the Colorado game. And, I don't know if this actually makes the most sense, in terms of defensive scheming or whatever, but I feel like they would be wise to come in with an aggressive defensive philosophy and be blitzing a lot and just trying to make Dylan uncomfortable and, sack him a few times, because that will be, his first real test. And it's like, well, is your offensive line up to snuff? And can this kid, keep his wits about him after getting pummeled once? Or is he gonna, kind of crack under the pressure? And you're kind of going to bet the game on, or at least that side of the game on, testing this kid's mettle, as it were.
I think you're exactly right, Alex. That's exactly what they're going to do. I would be shocked if they don't do that. I mean, that is the thing they have to do. Now, the question is, how good can our offensive line be? I mean, our offensive line was adequate at times last year, but then we had some injuries and we had to shuffle some people around, and we're getting a lot of those guys back. But this defensive line for Colorado is all new, right? And they've upgraded quite significantly on their offensive and defensive line. So even though they've had a lot of turnover because they lost 42, 43 players, whatever, that left the program, they had almost that same amount come in as transfers. So they're going to be significantly better collectively in terms of talent. But like you said earlier in the podcast, it is about how quickly can they gel as a defense and as an offensive unit to effectively protect their quarterback and then, of course, rush the passer. I expect that our quarterback, whether it's Raiola or anyone else, is going to have to deal with a considerable amount of pressure in that game against Colorado. But we are at home, and what we need to do is be equally aggressive and get ahead of them and force them into a game where they have to put it on Shadur's shoulders, their quarterback, and Coach Sanders' son, and see if we can squeeze them the same way.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. Now you were just talking about, his rules philosophy with coaches and, stability and promoting from people from within and everything. But since our last podcast, there has been quite a shakeup in that coaching room, and that our defensive backs coach, Evan Cooper, resigned. He was with Rule for 12 years, sticking with him through the NFL and some of his past college days. So that came as quite a surprise to me, after sticking with Rule for so long. What was your reaction when you first saw that news?
Oh, I was completely shocked. I had no idea. Now, some people who are closer to the program and stuff did know that there was some possibility of this. The details of why he chose to resign, because it's not like he resigned to go take immediately another coaching job. He resigned because he's got some other personal issues that he needs to address, and the details of which we don't have to talk about in this podcast. But just suffice to say that, in fact, Coach Rule even made a point during the press conference to say, Evan is a friend. He's somebody I care about. So it's not like that relationship soured so much as it was a circumstance where I think Evan knew or believed it was the best thing to do for him to resign, step away, because he was about ready to go into another season where he was probably going to be working 16 hours a day, because Matt Rule has a very high expectation of his coaches, right? So if you've got other personal demons that you're dealing with at the time, and you feel like I need to address these first, then, going into a new football season that's going to last 3 or 4 months probably isn't the best circumstance. So Evan stepped away.
Right.
But going back to the stability thing, and the fact that he's ready for it, I don't know how much heads up Rule had that this was going to happen, but it sure seems like he had some heads up, because he had an ace in the hole. He had a guy who most would regard as an upgrade from a coaching standpoint. What we're going to lose is Evan Cooper was one of Coach Rule's most respected, and he was the Matt's confidant, right, regarding talent evaluation. Evan was a guy that Matt leaned on pretty heavily to identify players that would emerge as really great players. He just had a real eye for talent, and we're gonna miss that particularly special skill that Evan Cooper had. And I don't know that I can expect that the replacement coach, what's John's last name?
Butler.
John Butler. I don't know how good he is at that part of it, but John's resume in terms of coaching defensive backs, he's a former defensive coordinator for Penn State. This is a guy that was genuinely expected to be a defensive coordinator in the NFL quite soon, and I think the fact that Rule was able to convince him to come back to the college game, and with the likelihood that because of Tony White's lineage, and the likelihood that we might lose Tony here in the next year or two to a head coaching job because he's so sought after, that this guy might become the heir apparent to be the next defensive coordinator for Nebraska. So the fact that you could backfill with that kind of a talent, it was impressive,
right,
in my mind.
Well, to your point, he was the defensive backs coach with the Buffalo Bills for their past 6 seasons, but he left the team, I want to say, in February of this year, specifically because he wants to be a defensive coordinator, and I guess he felt he wasn't getting that opportunity at the Bills.
The Bills' job was open, and the head coach passed over him and chose somebody else, right? So I think he probably thought he was in a great position to get that defensive coordinator job. And when he didn't get it, he felt like, okay, well, that's the signal that I've hit my ceiling here. I need to move on.
Right. But you're right. Within a week or so of Evan Cooper leaving, John Butler was announced as his replacement. Like you said, he was a defensive coordinator at Penn State in 2013. He was the head coach at the Texans in the NFL for a few years. And as mentioned, he's publicly stated that he wants to be a defensive coordinator. So I get the feeling that either the situation you said happens where Tony White leaves and maybe he takes over, or Tony White stays and John Butler will probably leave at some point for some opportunity in the college ranks, you would think.
Correct. I think he is only with us for a couple of years if he doesn't move up into a defensive coordinator role. So, but the bottom line is he has been responsible for like a top 5 defensive secondary, like almost each one of the last 4 or 5 years. And he has coached some of the best defensive backs in the NFL. So, I mean, in terms of being able to get the attention of our defensive back room, this guy is going to have their attention from the very beginning because they know this is a guy that's coached at the highest level.
Right. Yeah. So like you say, it's a good get overall for sure.
It sure seems like it.
Yeah. Now, on the last podcast, we didn't really go much into recruiting and, visits and transfers and things of that nature. And since that podcast in early June, obviously there have been more that have come to the program. So I believe you have a list of our some more high profile commits recently.
Well, so I'm going to run through some names. Not all of them are recent per se, but we're at 17 commits right now for this 2025 class. And it's interesting. We've got a pretty good defensive line group already, committed to us. And so these are the guys that are already committed. Malcolm Simpson, who is out of Texas and is a 4-star defensive lineman, a very sought after guy. Just recently, one of those newest commitments is another D lineman out of North Dakota. Cade Pedrzak is his name. And Cade is a guy, he's like the number 1 recruit out of the state of North Dakota. And that's significant because, Minnesota and Wisconsin and even Iowa have all been pretty successful at recruiting North Dakota, probably more so than we have. But we have a few North Dakota guys that we've gotten over the years, but not very many. And so to be able to get basically the top dude out of the state of North Dakota is a big deal. Now, we've had more success recruiting South Dakota at Nebraska, and we also got the top player out of South Dakota to commit to us as well, and that's Sean Hammerbeck. And he's an interior offensive lineman. So a couple of big dudes from the Dakotas. And that's kind of the formula for Nebraska to build depth and have success, is to get those top players from the 500-mile radius around Lincoln, especially the big boys in the offensive and defensive line. And earlier on, we got TJ Latif at quarterback, who's a 4-star and was one of the Elite 11 quarterbacks. I didn't follow the Elite 11 very much this year, so I honestly don't know how he performed overall during that competition. And frankly, that doesn't necessarily always project to collegiate success, Well,
I was going to say, wasn't Adrian Martinez, he was one of the Elite 11 in high school, right?
Yep. Well, and we've had a few over the years that did well. In fact, not just so was our current freshman, Raiola and
right.
And Kalen both were Elite 11 last year. But that's an indicator that they're in that upper echelon. And as long as we can be getting those kinds of talents at the quarterback position, I think we should be pretty well stocked at that position. I'm not saying we got any future, Heisman Trophy winners or anything, but we got guys that should be able to execute, do the job. And if we surround them with good offensive line play and good good wide receivers, then that quarterback position will perform. So that's always an anchor in every recruiting class is to get a top flight quarterback so that receivers and running backs and just all other offensive players can kind of rally around that guy when you're building your class out. And the other thing we've done really well is go into to the Polynesian community, and we've gotten a couple of big time players out of that. We picked up an offensive lineman who is the top player from Hawaii, and his name is too long for me to pronounce, but I'll do my best. His first name is Houston. I can get that one. And then his last name is Kahania Torres. And he's only ranked as a 3-star, but the history of St. Louis High School in Honolulu is a remarkable one. And I think that's where the Dominic Rayala and Donovan Rayala and Dominic's son are all kind of creating a pull for the Polynesian community. We also got another Polynesian with a much shorter name, Brian Tapua, and he's out of Utah, but he's 6'5", 300-pound offensive tackle. Again, only a 3-star prospect, but he's got that body type and that attitude that a lot of the Polynesians have, and I love it. So I'm just really excited about a lot of these guys, and we've got some other top talent. I don't need to run through and get every single one of them, but the nice thing is we've gone into Utah and gotten a couple of people. We've done well in Nebraska, although we haven't gotten all the Nebraska kids. Some of the Nebraska kids, especially the Omaha kids, still are looking elsewhere. And I know that Matt Rule is working hard to kind of close the doors around the state of Nebraska, and he's making progress in that. But that's going to take a while because it's been a few years since we really had control of this of the city of Omaha in terms of getting the best athletes out of there. So I feel like he's doing pretty darn good in that regard.
This isn't, Nebraska specific in terms of local kids, but I saw one comment, I think it was talking about a visit, like we've got a couple big players who I think they have visited and they're returning for like second visits, including 5-star wide receiver Michael Terry III and 5-star offensive tackle David Sanders Jr. And I saw a comment online saying like, well, whatever you think of Rule, he's gotten more, high level recruiting interest in Nebraska in the past, 6 months to a year than our past 5 years or 10 years or whatever you want to say.
And I would say that is absolutely correct. We may not win a lot of these recruiting battles because we're obviously going up against the top player or top teams of the current era to go after these 5-star talents. But the fact that we're getting into the short lists for these guys is a big deal. And it indicates that they're getting a message that they believe and that they're sensing the energy and the momentum that is starting to build at Nebraska. So, you know what, at this point, I don't know that we would necessarily be considered the favorites to get any of those guys. But if we started winning and we built some positive momentum, we're in the thick of it, right? And then if a couple of things happen with one or the other of their other finalists, then we might emerge as the choice, right? So you can't hit the home run unless you swing the bat.
That's right.
And the fact is he's doing that. So and the thing is that we're getting a lot of 3-star guys that others would consider maybe a little like B-level players. But then you start reading about these players and their attitude and their athleticism and things like that. They may not be the most highly regarded from a football performance standpoint yet. But again, that goes back to Rule and his staff's ability to identify talent.
Yeah.
And then believe in their own ability to develop that talent.
Well, to that point, I want to say it might have been this Sean Hammerbuckle guy or whatever his name is. But I saw like the one guy who was rated as a 3-star recently got upgraded to a 4-star, and we had already locked him down. So that just kind of goes to your point.
Yeah, Sean Hammerbeck is what I think you're talking about. But yes, and a couple of guys we didn't mention. We did have a defensive back who was a starter at USC as a defensive back his freshman year, and then began last season as a starter, but then kind of had a falling away. And so there's certainly some history there that will have to be uncovered. Do we have a kid who has an entitlement expectation, or was this a kid that just needed to go through a maturity spot, and he has now come out of that and learned a lesson into humility a little bit or whatever, and is ready to reinvest in his athletic pursuit of football. But he looks like a guy that has the skill set that, if he is focused, could be a contributor for us from day one. And he's coming in as a 24, so he's already on campus and is practicing with the team in their spring or their summer, activities that are not coached, but so it'll be interesting to see how quickly he can come up to speed.
Yep, that's Sierra Wright,
and spelled very uniquely.
Yes.
Yeah, so he's a guy that hopefully we can turn the corner on and get him to contribute, because we lost, one of our likely starter defensive backs to an injury during the spring game. And so that helps shore up what otherwise might have been an area of concern for us going into the season. We've really done pretty darn good, getting some good defensive backs, and again, some nice offensive linemen, some nice defensive linemen. So, it's a solid class. It's not a spectacular class. In fact, it looks like it's ranked like ninth in the Big Ten. So not great, right, compared to where we would like to be. But this recruiting class ain't over yet. And like you said, I have a feeling that some of these guys might go up in their ranking as the season progresses.
Definitely. Now, in terms of other sides of Nebraska sports, obviously the volleyball team has also been in the news recently, doing their thing. I think you wanted to comment on some of those updates.
Yeah, well, so the thing with the volleyball team is that they've had a super busy summer, even though they haven't been together. So it's going to be interesting to see how quickly they can come together as a team. We are a team that, even though we had no seniors last year, we actually had quite a bit of turnover. We lost 4 players to the portal, right? These are players that all of whom were basically, all but one of them was not a starter. They were players that were seeing very little action and were likely not to see the floor very much in the next year or two of their careers. So they found greener pastures, right? And it looks like they all landed at places where they're likely to get that. So great for them. A loss for us in terms of depth and our where we might have been otherwise. But then we also were able to go into that market, right? That transfer portal market, and get a few players in return who are hopefully going to contribute directly and actually potentially be starters or in the regular rotation for us, and might be able to elevate our team rather than diminish it. So I'm excited to see how this new group, including our newest recruits, our true freshmen that are coming in, who've already been on campus since January, and it looks like we have some pretty good depth at almost every position except for one, and that's opposite. The opposite, we did lose an opposite, and we did not replace that role. So it'll be interesting to see how Coach Cook manages that particular lack of depth issue. But it sure looks like we are positioned to make another run, to maybe be Big Ten champions, or at least pursue that, and then compete for a national championship through the tournament. And during the summer, a lot of our players have been playing on the national teams. We had multiple players playing for the under 19 age group competition, and they won gold. And then the under 21 group also competed, including a number of our starters, Bergen Riley and Andy Jackson, and folks like that were on that team. Our libero, our one of our defensive specialists, Lanny Choboy, was likely to be a player there, but then she She tweaked a muscle in the last week of practice before the event, so she ended up not going, but she likely would have been on that roster if she had not gotten hurt. So there was quite a bit of volleyball practice and coaching at a very high level. A lot of that, USA volleyball coaching. So, and they performed very well. Therese Sigler, who is actually not even a player yet, she's still a recruit. She was on that team as well. So we even had some future recruits that were significant contributors to some of these teams. So it was just really cool to watch and see. I just think it bodes well not only for this year, but even going forward. I mean, these were the MVP type of performances on these international competitions.
Yeah, no, that is cool to hear. And obviously, we're about to have the Olympics start. So, the world will be kind of watching that side of things for that side of the volleyball world.
And our Olympic team still includes 3 former Huskers, all 3 of which would, if they're healthy, likely be starters. We'll see what happens. Jordan Larson, who of course is a name that almost everyone knows in the volleyball world, but she's going into the Olympics having just injured her leg. She had apparently some kind of a hamstring type of issue, and they've been treating it kind of lightly, and so she hasn't played very much. So I'm not sure how much she will get to see the court unless she's going in to stabilize things or as a change of pace. I'm not sure she's going to be a starter, but in all likelihood, Kelsey Robinson Cook is likely to be a regular starter, and Justine Juan Orantes is likely kind of anchored as our libero. So we'll have at least 2 former Huskers on that Olympic floor most games. Now, I'm going to say that having watched them, I don't think they're peaking at the right time. They're not playing their best volleyball. So I'm hopeful we can get to the medal round. I'm not sure we'll end up on the podium in Paris. I just think that team is fighting injuries at the setter position because of all the turning over. There's not been any consistency with the outside hitters. I just don't know that we're going to do that well in that Olympic tournament. But as far as how that relates to Nebraska, I think the good news is the visibility that Nebraska is a place that develops talent and leads to people being able to pursue their dreams of being a USA volleyball player are absolutely alive and well. And that's good for future recruiting.
Definitely. So one last thing we wanted to talk about on the national level was an interesting report that was flying around the other day. So it's not, official yet, but it's saying that the NCAA will vote on this or will approve this change, which is basically to create a new roster cap for college sports. Now that, you have your scholarship athletes, and then you also can pay them in NIL. Theoretically, the rosters can be as big as you want. So the report states that for football, the total will go up to 105 instead of 85. And for volleyball, it would go up to 18 instead of 12.
Wow.
One other interesting tidbit I saw is that it also includes a change where for football specifically, you'll be able to offer partial scholarships instead of full scholarships. So, with someone who maybe is like kind of a walk-on level player, maybe you could offer them a partial scholarship instead of the full thing.
Right. And then obviously NIL is still going to be an important component of that. And so you can move money around to kind of accommodate people in whatever way you want. And it's going to make literally, the job of putting together a roster super complicated. Where now Nebraska's a program that's going to get impacted by this roster limit more than almost any other football program, specifically because we have historically carried a much larger walk-on contingent than almost anybody else. And so I don't know that that's been finally decided unless you read something just today on it. that 105 number, there seems to be a little back and forth between 105 and 110. I'm really hoping that it's the 110 number. But if we end up with the 105, that's where it's at. Now, what I think Coach Rule will try to pursue and argue through our athletic department, through our AD, et cetera, is to say, okay, you want us to be at 105. Well, then at least give us the opportunity to have a practice squad. These are kids that are not officially on the roster, but they are part of this other thing called a practice squad, and they cannot suit out for a game or anything like that. They're not part of the team in those official capacities, but they are guys that we can invite to join the program and participate in practices and be a part of our program. And then if circumstances happen in such a way that either players leave the program during the course of the football season or because of injuries and things like that, that we could pull people out of that practice squad and bring them into the 105. Does that make sense to you? And I think that's what Coach Rule is going to push, to have something along those lines. Because if we don't, then the next question is, how quickly do we need to get down to the 105? Because we're probably around 145 right now. And so we would have to tell effectively 40 players, sorry, we can no longer have you on the team. And I'm hoping that they give maybe a transition that allows, teams that are above the 105 to allow the players that are, a quantity of players that are above that number, a period of time. Like we have to move and get 50% closer to the 105 unit or number by next year, 2025. And then by 2026, we have to be down to 105. So it gives us a couple of years to kind of shuffle the deck and not have to kick kids out.
Like you say, Nebraska probably has it worse than most other teams, but I'm sure there are plenty of others that are over 105. And like you say, would need time to kind of adjust.
Yeah.
What I was going to ask you though, let's say 105 is the number. Do you think that, either out of tradition or, just because it makes logical sense or whatever, do you, kind of set aside like 5 of those spots to kind of be available for walk-on players, or like, other ones that, might fit that role? Or is it sort of a thing where if you've got, a talented player available who deserves a scholarship, you're going to give him one and you're not going to worry about the walk-ons anymore?
Right. Well, I think they're going to continue to want to pursue that and devote resources like they do now to evaluate talent throughout the state of Nebraska and throughout the Midwest, really, which is where we get most of our walk-ons. And if you see a kid that's, just an underdeveloped player, he's clearly a great athlete, but he just hasn't played enough football, or maybe he just is at a super small school where he's not getting any exposure. Yeah, they're still going to try to find a way to get that guy, into the program, and then if they can, get them to develop to a certain point, then they get a scholarship. So yes, I think they're going to try to find a way that they can still do that sort of thing, but yet still honoring, because one of the reasons for the 105, of course, is the Title IX restrictions on that, right? So, but with these other roster limits going up, like you just described, volleyball going from 12 to 18, I hope it doesn't go to 18. If it does, that's not good for the competitive balance of of that sport, because if they go to 18, well, then Nebraska and Texas and Wisconsin and Oregon and Louisville and all the great volleyball programs of today are going to fill all 18 of those spots, most likely with scholarship level talent, even if they're not all on scholarship. They'll fill them up with NIL dollars, and if they do that, then those are 5 more players that are sitting on the bench,
right?
Or 6, I guess it is 12 to 18, 6, and that's just going to be people hoarding talent. Now, and now with the portal, some of the more of those people would obviously move on and do that sort of thing. So it's not a guarantee, but certainly coming out of high school, there will be more of a concentration of talent at certain institutions.
Right.
And I don't know that that's healthy for the sport. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out.
Well, I don't follow the sport much, but the one that really stood out to me on this list is baseball. because it says it's going from 12 to 34, which is an increase of 22 scholarships, which is pretty crazy.
Right. Well, but it's not scholarships, just roster size. Now, understand that baseball, especially men's baseball, has been choked down to 12 like that because of Title IX. Okay, because most schools that also had a football team and a lot of other what I'll call traditional men's sports, baseball is a team is a sport that requires a roster of 30 to 40 players. Most baseball teams, even now, most college baseball teams probably have 10 to 15 pitchers.
Right.
Just pitchers, right? And you got to be developing your next generation of pitchers, and it might take a couple of years for a pitcher to mature into even just a mid inning reliever, and you only have maybe 8 or 9 guys that you think are starters, but then so there's just all kinds of very unique roles that they play. That 12 scholarships, those were not complete scholarships, right? Very few baseball players received full rides. They were almost all on partial scholarships. So they would use those 12 scholarships and they would allocate them across 30 guys, right?
Oh, I see.
And so that's why that number doesn't seem all that crazy when you think about what typical roster sizes are for baseball teams, even now. But the issue is now they can have that roster, but how many of them can be scholarship? That's those are some of the questions that are not yet answered. Same with volleyball. I don't know they're going to go from 12 to 18, but if they do, and they allow people to actually increase the number of scholarships that the school is giving out, well, then you know what? Nebraska would be motivated to do that because number one, that helps their Title IX. That gives them more scholarships to give on the men's side if they go ahead and push the scholarship number up to 18 for a women's sport like volleyball, right? This opens a whole huge array of issues.
I mean, from the article I'm seeing, it's saying that is the number of scholarships you can give, but you're not required to give. You can choose to give less.
Correct. And a lot of schools, in fact, I would say other than the Big Ten and the SEC, and maybe certain teams, within the ACC and the Big 12 will select certain teams within their athletic department where they would choose to maybe go to those maximums. But most schools will not because they can't afford it.
Yeah, no, it is. It's a significant increase in their annual, revenues there or payments, I should say.
And the SEC has come out and said, they're going to have this revenue sharing formula. And right now the number that's being thrown out there is $22 million a year. Well, and that's for all athletes. And the SEC has said, well, they're kind of working towards a target of about 15 million of that 22 million being for the football team. And then the remaining 7 is going to be distributed throughout the rest of the athletic department. And so that's a big number, right? So it's like, I don't, somebody did the math on that, and a typical roster size is like $187,000 or $147,000 per player. So I don't know how that's all going to shake out, but every school is going to have to deal with it differently based on where they are in Title IX. And I think it's going to motivate schools to work really hard at getting more men into their school, right?
Right.
Because Title IX isn't just a 50-50 split. It's based on ratio of men to women at school. So if you're at a school that's 55% women and 45% men, then only 45% of the scholarships can be men. Right. And if you've got a football team, there's no comparable sport on the women's side that matches football. So it's just going to get really hard and difficult for somebody to manage that.
Yeah. Though I will say, I remember in Rule's interview with McAfee, he was talking about his daughter, throwing the football around and talking about how that is becoming a thing, which I wasn't aware of, like women's, kind of football teams and things like that.
Yep. And that might motivate new women's sports like a football league or, other
other sports that currently are primarily, well, you're already seeing it with like soccer and the rowing. What do you call rowing? There's not a name for it, but having women's rowing teams as much as you have men's rowing teams and things of that nature. In fact, some schools have only women's and not men's. So that's how they offset the male female balance. So they're finding creative ways to do that.
Right.
But you want to do sports that don't cost very much.
Right.
That's
the goal.
Yeah. So we'll see. But it's going to be a challenge.
Yep. So I know it seems crazy, but we're already basically at the end of July. The football season isn't that far away now.
It really isn't. In fact, Nebraska starts practice next week.
Well, there you go. So we'll begin back into a more regular schedule of podcasting here coming up. We'll be talking about Nebraska's fall practice, properly previewing our upcoming games. We'll actually be together in mid-August, so that would be a good time to do a podcast.
Yes, absolutely. By then we might know a little bit about what's going on. Coach Rule is going to do everybody's going to go into the dorms and they're going to be in Selleck Hall, and the whole team's going to be together. So even the guys who are living off campus, everybody moves into the dorms, and they're going to spend the first couple of weeks before the regular students return to school, so that they're all right there next to the football facilities, and they kind of are all collectively contained together to build team bonding.
He did that last year as well, so he must have felt it was a success.
Well, I think so, and we'll see how it goes this year. I think there's a limited time. That experience is going to have a life cycle to it, but he's trying to make it hard. He's trying to push them and see how many of them have the competitive intensity to really go out there and compete when they're tired and they're sore and they're sleeping in a foreign bed that they're not used to, and those kinds of things. So he's trying to stress them.
Yep. So yeah, we'll report on how all that goes in the National World of College Football as we get into Dad's favorite time of the year.
That's right. It's upon us very quickly here.
Yes. So if you all out there enjoyed listening to this podcast, you can email us at huskerpete13@gmail.com. You can also find us if you search for College Football Throwdown on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can leave us a rating or review there. We always love listening to fan feedback. So thank you all there for listening, and thank you, Dad, for joining me for this episode. And until next time, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.